Pete, and we welcome everyone here to our fellowship. We are a fellowship, that means we're a bit small, but we like our size, although we want to grow gently. We are a free and liberal congregation, as is the Unitarian Universalist concept. We respect the inherent worth and dignity of all people, regardless of color, creed, or background. We welcome everybody, regardless of sexual orientation. We're a liberal community. We invite any who are listening online to come and join us in the future. And it is now time for announcements. We have one announcement coming, I think. We're multitasking this morning. Oh, we have a second announcement. All right.
Okay. If you're playing D&D, if you if you continue to interrupt and like interrupt the session, you will not be allowed to continue. Okay.
I think I got the gist of that.
Hi, it's me again talking about these dolls. We're just about to send our third submission to Health Partners International of Canada. And so Valerie and Sheila, thank you for your help. And these are the dolls that go to the service persons and the medical personnel. They come in the medical kits and they give them to the children, traumatized children in war-torn communities, poverty-stricken communities, and they also help with the trauma that the service people and the medical professionals have as well. So thank you, and hopefully, if you want to knit, keep in mind the third Sunday if you want to get involved. Thank you.
Morning. In 2 weeks, on August 17th at Ironstone Park at 9 a.m. we will be conducting a ritual to support the efforts towards justice for murdered and missing Indigenous women. If you would like to come, please feel free to join us. If you have questions, come see me. Next week I will have pieces of paper that have all the details on it so that you can just take that home with you. But we'd really love to see you. Thank you.
I put a whole crate of cucumbers and tomatoes in the other room, so please take them. You girl.
Hey, thank you everybody for their announcements. We are honored and we'll have the pleasure of hearing once again from Jerry Lazzaro. Jerry is a longtime member of the Unitarian, actually Thomas Paine Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, our colleagues down the road in Collegeville. Jerry has a large variety of expertise, and it's always interesting to hear him talk to us. He's energetic, well-versed. In addition, he has a lovely singing voice, which you're going to hear down the line a little bit. So without any further ado, podium is yours.
Thank you, John. Good morning, all of you here in the sanctuary and those of you joining us online. I'm honored and delighted to once again lead worship here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. I have fond memories of previous visits to the fellowship and the friendships established here. I also pass along greetings from Reverend Dave Hunter. He's leading worship this morning at Thomas Paine. I was working with him and I was scheduled to be his worship assistant this morning. So I've been in communication with him many times over the past several weeks, and he implored me to convey his fondness for all of you and his best wishes to all of you here at UUFP. Obviously, I was able to find somebody to pinch hit for me at Thomas Paine, otherwise I wouldn't be here this morning. Today, with the help of Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the most influential pioneers of the Unitarian movement, we'll reflect on the experience of the natural world as a universal path to spiritual growth and awareness. We'll explore some of Emerson's radical ideas. Now, that means radical in both senses of the word. Radical in referring to the root of something, and to something as revolutionary, to some ideas outside of the mainstream of generally accepted thought, or even outside conventional ways of thinking. You know, with the disturbing politicization of religious thought today, and especially the aggressive advocacy of Christian nationalism in this country, it's a good time to remind ourselves what differentiates our liberal religious faith from the Judeo-Christian tradition and Christian orthodoxy, especially evangelical fundamentalist orthodoxy. And it's always a good time to appreciate how Unitarian Universalism offers a wider and more inclusive path to spiritual growth and to social harmony as well. Well, let's begin worship this morning by lighting chalice, as UU communities across the US and around the world will do as they worship today. Can I get some assistance here? Their chalice light. The chalice and the flame together form the symbol of our free faith. They signify, among many things, our openness to the wisdom of many traditions and many ages, and of our commitment to keep the light of truth, the warmth of compassion, and the flame of liberty and justice burning within ourselves and throughout our world. We light our chalice this morning appropriately with an affirmation by Reverend Ellen Hamilton, Faith in Summer. In faith together, we light this small scrap of light, symbol of Grandfather Sun's enormous power, whose energy burns so brightly in these days of deep summer, catapulting the leaves and vines, vegetables and flowers and fruits to astonishing size, lengths, and heights, spilling over the tops of cages, walls, and trellises, delighting and nourishing all beings. We bask in the warmth and the heat of these days, maybe a little too much heat, with lightened hearts and quickened senses, in gratitude and in faith. Okay, good to sing, I think. Let's join in singing hymn number 92 in your gray hymnal, Mysterious Presence, Source of All. You know, the words of this song were created the year before Emerson delivered his famous Harvard School Divinity address. They expressed the direction religious thought was taking at the time, at least among the more, how did you put it, liberal factions in Christianity. And they were all much influenced by Emerson's ministry and by his writings, such as his extended essay, Nature, that was published in 1836. So the words of this are really quite wonderful. Mysterious present source of all. we like to say, well, see, we have some young UUs here. If they'd like to come up front. I had a couple of things I was going to ask them to share with us. I think you guys have actually your own little stuff here, right? Oh, pass that out, the folks. Oh, yeah, more comfortable seat. Right? Yeah, there you go, guys. Hi, I'm Jerry Lazzaro. I'm leading worship here this morning. At one point, when I first joined the Unitarian Universalist Church, I was the RE director. I spent a lot of time with kids. Anyway, you know what season we're in, right? Summer, yeah. When back in June, I don't know if you remember back that far, and you were thinking, wait, the summer's coming up, right? Maybe you were still in school, right? And you were thinking, gee, summer's coming. What were you thinking? Wow, now I'm going to get to do what? Play with your friends, right? Not just after school, but the whole day, right? Swim in the pool. Oh yeah, can't forget that. Yeah.
Playing a sprinkler?
Oops, wait a second. What was that?
Playing a sprinkler?
Playing a sprinkler. Oh, that's fun. So, do you have a slip and slide too? No, that's just a sprinkler. That's great. Yeah. And these are things that you really associate with summer, right? These are things that now you're able to do. When you're doing them, how do you feel? Good? Do you feel like freer? Do you feel like somehow, wow, you're more in touch with, you're more in touch with the world around you too, you're noticing things, when you're running off to school, you don't notice the trees so much, you may not notice the flowers, you may not notice a bunch of things, but you do notice because now you have time during the day, right? Do any of you like to read during the summer? Yeah, that was one of my favorite things to do. I was a free range kid. I grew up in a time when you didn't have play dates. You walked outside the door, whoever was in the street, that's who you played with, that kind of thing. And I'd be out the door like 7:30 in the morning, and I'd be playing ball, and I'd be doing this and riding my bike. But in the afternoon, I would like to settle down with a book, right? And my neighborhood was so new, we didn't even have a library. We only had a bookmobile. It came every 2 weeks, and you could get 5 books. Anybody remember these things? You could only get 5 books. And so I would get 5 books, and then I said, well, I gotta read these in the next 2 weeks because when the bookmobile comes, I want to get 5 more books, And I would spend those afternoons with a little bag of Cheetos, and some ice cream. It's funny. And I just, it's funny because I remember those times so vividly, and how I felt more relaxed. I felt more in touch with myself. I felt more in touch with things that are going on around me. Do you feel that way too sometimes in the summer? Yeah, it's really neat. Well, anyway, is there something that you wanted to do this summer you haven't done yet? Go to the beach. Go to the beach? Go where to?
Sleepaway camp.
Oh, wow, sleepaway camp, yeah. Yeah, you're gonna go, how soon are you gonna go? Oh, right after oh, wow, okay, you're leaving today.
It's in the car.
Oh, no, okay. Cabins, yeah, you go up to the mountains and stay in a cabin? How about you?
Like starting.
What's that?
Tomorrow. Starting tomorrow.
Starting tomorrow.
Day camp.
Day camp, wow, yeah, and all those things. And, as you're doing these things, if you think about it, sit and think about, what are you doing? Because I'm telling you, those memories will probably stay with you your whole life. Like look, you know how old I am? You know how far back I'm going to remember those summer things I did? It's a long, long time, and the beach, oh my gosh. I was never so happy as I was on a beach. So, okay, guys, you have classes today, right? So can we sing our young folks off to classes? Oh. You know, I love the second verse of our opening song this morning. Thou breathest in the rushing wind, thy spirit stirs in leaf and flower. Nor wilt thou from the willing mind withhold thy light and love and power. Keep those words in mind as we share excerpts from Emerson's essay, The Oversoul. Do we have it? Oh, good. Okay, we have that right. Okay. In that essay, Emerson develops his thoughts concerning the nature and existence of a higher power and how it manifests itself in human experience, especially our experience of nature. So please join in reciting responsibly the Oversoul. It's reading 531 in our gray hymnal. We have it? Let us learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds.
As there is no stream between our heads and the heavens, so there is no bar of its soul, that sees, and God the cause begins.
I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine.
There is deep power in which exists, and then the attitude that's such a one.
Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable.
It comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to the veritable. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and gratitude.
The soul's help consists in the fullness of its reception. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the universal one.
When it reads through all it is Jesus. When it reads through all the figure of you. When it flows through all it is love.
Within us is the soul of the whole. We're invited to worship through sharing this morning with individually and together words fashioned by Reverend Heather Christensen, Church of the Larger Fellowship, who reminds us of our shared mission and responsibility as Unitarian Universalists. And can I take the offering? Okay. Unitarian Universalism is a grand vision of a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. That vision is embodied in a few large congregations, numerous mid-sized congregations, and many, many small congregations. No matter its size, every congregation depends on each of its members. Each one of you, by your commitment of time, energy, and resources, helps make that grand real. Individually and together, we are Unitarian Universalists, building a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. If we'll accept this morning's offering. I'd like to share with you now the opening section of Ralph Waldo Emerson's 1838 Divinity School address. He had been invited not to speak at the graduation ceremony, but at a dinner the evening before the graduation ceremony. But first, let's take a moment to center and focus, right? Get comfortable in your seat. Maybe rub your shoulders a little bit, rub your shoulders a little bit, move your head, get some of that tension off there. And close your eyes, focus on your breathing. Try to clear your mind. Take a few deep breaths. And be ready to receive Emerson's poetic vision of summer and how it may open the mind to the wonder and beauty of the natural world and inspire curiosity about the essence of human nature and its connection to all of nature. In this refulgent summer, it has been a luxury to draw the breath of life. The grass grows, the buds burst, the meadow is spotted with fire and gold in the tint of flowers. The air is full of birds and sweet with the breath of the pine, the balm of Gilead, and the new hay. Night brings no gloom to the heart with its welcome shade. Through the transparent darkness, the stars pour their almost spiritual rays. Under them, we seem young children, and our huge globe a toy. The cool night bathes the world as with a river and prepares our eyes again for the crimson dawn. The mystery of nature was never displayed more happily. The corn and the wine have been freely dealt to all creatures, and the never-broken silence with which the old bounty goes forward has not yielded yet one word of explanation. One is constrained to respect the perfection of this world in which our senses converse. How wide, how rich. What invitation from every property it gives to every faculty of ours. In its fruitful soils, in its navigable sea, in its mountains of metal and stone, in its forests of all woods, in its animals, in its chemical ingredients, in the powers and path of light, heat, attraction, and life. It is well worth the pith and heart of the great to subdue and enjoy it. The painters, the mechanics, the inventors, the astronomers, the builders of cities, and the captains that history delights to honor. But when the mind opens and reveals the laws which traverse the universe and make things what they are, then shrinks the great world at once into a mere illustration and fable of the mind. What am I? What is? Asks the human spirit with a curiosity new kindled, but never to be quiet. Behold these laws, behold these infinite relations, so like, so unlike, many yet one. I would study, I would know, I would admire forever. Now, I ask you to stay in that moment again. Stay relaxed and focus on your breathing. And excuse for a time what's on your mind. Allow yourself to summon images of summer times, places, events that you recall vividly. Maybe when you found yourself so immersed in the present moment that you felt detached from the world, but at the same time intimately connected to it. You were acutely aware of the unique sensual experience of the moment, its colors, shapes, sounds, smells, the stillness or movement of air, the play of light and shadow. But at the same time, you sensed a continuity and a unity with all time and all space. You sensed something that was the precise moment, but that transcended a precise moment. And abide there for a minute in the refulgence of summer. know about you, but when I go back, the memories are so vivid and the feelings come back too. I remember, it was, first I was on my honeymoon, actually, we were camping in Nova Scotia and right on the beach, or a little field above the beach. And it was, as it turned out, the night of a super moon, and it rose from the sea. And I mean, it was like being born wet from the sea. It seemed to be dripping as it came out of the ocean. It was absolutely awe-inspiring, right? And I still, that is as vivid in my mind as anything that happened 2 minutes ago. Anyway, okay. So my message this morning is based on Ralph Waldo Emerson's speech to the graduating class of the Harvard Divinity School in 1838. And you know, it began, so I read an excerpt from it, in this refulgent summer, it is a luxury to draw the breath of life. That's what Emerson proclaimed in the opening line of that address. It's a wonderfully evocative statement, isn't it? The richness of sound and sense in the word refulgence, right? Radiating light, luminous, brilliant, shining, dazzling, right? And where did you go when I asked you to return in your mind's eye to a place where you were moved by summer's refulgence? Wasn't it truly a luxury to draw breath in that moment? The meaning of the luxury that best fits Emerson's context is luxury is a pleasure out of the ordinary allowed to oneself. When you allowed yourself to indulge in summer's refulgence, breathing was no longer just a necessity, it was a luxury, an extraordinary pleasure. When just taking a breath feels like a luxury, we discover not just pleasure, but treasure. You know, think of that line from William Wordsworth's most famous poem, I wandered lonely as a cloud. Everybody else calls it daffodils, right? You know, in that poem, he recounts his experience of coming upon a crowd, a host of golden daffodils along the shore of a lake. And he tells us, I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth to me this show had brought. And experiencing that luxury is also inspiring, right? The original literal meaning of the word inspiration is, of course, inhalation, breathing in. You weren't just breathing in, you were living deeply, abundantly. You were inspired, drawing the breath of life itself. And you felt inspired. Emerson's poetic evocation of summer resonates with us, doesn't it? Would anyone here today take issue with his conviction that fully experiencing the natural world uplifts us, elevates us to a higher level of consciousness, even moves us to sense the presence of a higher power all around us and in us? So you might have trouble believing when I tell you just how much the opening section of Emerson's Divinity School address jolted his audience. Historian Philip Gura writes, innocuous as his words sound today, his audience would have snapped to attention. And Gura explains it this way. Nature, Emerson was saying, is not fallen, as Christians maintain, but in itself perfect and worthy of our worship. The sacramental corn and wine are not reserved for saints alone, but are available to all who seek them. And to appreciate the impact back then of Emerson's words, you have to understand that proclamations of human worth and dignity, think of our first principle, but that proclamations like that and of universal access to the sacraments were a direct challenge to the more conservative orthodox elements of Christianity. Such proclamations repudiated the Calvinistic view that nature, including human nature, was unworthy and corrupt, that we must look for goodness in a world other than the one we experience every day, and that only a chosen few of us were sanctified, saints preordained, worthy to participate in the sacraments, in the corn and the wine. But Emerson had only just begun. He had only just begun. Overall, his message to the Divinity School graduates was that they must attend to universal truths revealed by nature and incorporate them into ministry. And within that general framework, Emerson attacked belief central to Unitarian doctrine of the day as well, not merely to Christian orthodoxy. On the 375th anniversary of Harvard Divinity School, the Harvard Gazette called the Divinity School address, quote, a turning point for Unitarianism, beginning its transformation from a liberal form of Christianity to a type of religious liberalism independent of specific historic traditions. In short, Emerson didn't just challenge the conservative fundamental Christian establishment of his day, he was admonishing the liberal progressive religious establishment as well. He was criticizing fellow Unitarians and challenging them to take the next step forward toward liberating humankind from the authority of outdated and obsolete religious traditions. No wonder his address touched off a firestorm, not only in the Orthodox Christian community, but also in the ranks of the Unitarian elite. The dean of the Harvard Divinity School, a Unitarian minister, John Gorham Palfrey, who was in the audience that evening, was quoted as saying that what in this speech, quote, was not sheer folly, is downright atheism. And Andrews Norton, who had recently retired from the Harvard faculty to devote himself to biblical study, blasted not just Emerson, but all the adherents of this new school of thought that lured young men and women from their Christian faith and showed to the world that the greatest threat to Unitarianism was not coming from without, but from within its own ranks. It's no wonder that 30 years would pass before Emerson was again invited to speak at the Harvard Divinity School. He really wore out his welcome with that speech. But I think it's worth looking back today at the radical nature of some of Emerson's ideas. Radical in both senses of the word, that is, meaning the root of, because they are really the root of Unitarian faith. You will see every one of these principles that you have here reflected in that address, right? And also radical because it was, how could you put it, revolutionary. It was extreme, according to what people at the time thought, right? So what was Emerson saying in his address to the 1838 class of Harvard Divinity School that was deemed so radical? Well, let's focus on three of the most radical and influential ideas that he developed in his speech. One, we need no mediator between ourselves and the divine. We don't need scripture, no exegesis on scripture, no biblical scholars, no clergy even, no outside authority whatsoever. Two, traditional religious thought and practice, including the Judeo-Christian heritage, is too limited and too limiting to allow the soul to reach the highest heights of spiritual awakening. That's a blockbuster, all right? Okay. Three, and this caused all kinds of trouble. Jesus was not divine in a way that separates him from the rest of humanity. Jesus, quote, belonged to the true race of prophets, Emerson believed, but Jesus' prophetic message had been distorted and corrupted by organized religion. As Philip Gora said, he jolted his audience, They snapped to attention. So number one, we need no mediator between ourselves and the divine. Now, how did Emerson justify this claim? First of all, he insisted that evidence of a higher power is all around us. The natural world with its mystery, its grandeur, and its beauty, with its laws and patterns that science and art continuously reveal, provides sufficient justification for religious faith and instruction for moral practice. Along with this claim comes the corollary that revelation is not something that happens once in history and is ever complete. Revelation is ongoing, continuous. That's one of the kind of the basic tenets we all hold, right? As Emerson says in his address, we have come to speak of the revelation as somewhat long ago given and done, as if God were dead. The second reason we need no mediator is that we are endowed with intuition. Now, we have a very special meaning to that. That is, we're born with an inner sense that provides access to the divine. This intuitive sense of a higher power, confirmed in the grandeur, beauty, and wonder of the natural world, informs us that each individual must be the final arbiter of faith and belief. Not books, not institutions, not preachers, not any outside authority. And this is of course, is the basis of Emerson's concept of self-reliance. And it had nothing to do with just pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps or any silly nonsense like that, right? It meant that each person, in a sense, was the final arbiter of his or her beliefs, right? So, right? True religious faith is not something you can get secondhand from any book or from anybody. Here's what he says in his address, and you have to excuse the flowery diction of the time. Whilst the doors of the temple stand open night and day before all, and the oracles of this truth cease never, it is guarded by one stern condition. This, namely, it is an intuition. It cannot be received at second hand. Truly speaking, it is not instruction or provocation that I can receive from another soul. What he announces, I must find true in me, or wholly reject. And on his word, or as his second, be who he may, be who he may, be who he may, right? I can accept nothing. We could sum up this idea with a quote from another one of Emerson's essays. God enters by a private door into each individual. The second radical idea that Emerson preached in his address was that traditional religious thought and practice, including what we find in Judeo-Christian scripture, is too limited and too limiting to be the source of true faith. Two reasons for this inadequacy we just considered. True faith is not something you can get secondhand. And revelation is ongoing and continuous, not something that happened once upon a time. But Emerson expanded his criticism of the Judeo-Christian heritage on several fronts. He argues that Christian orthodoxy misses the whole point of Jesus' ministry. You can imagine his audience hearing this, right? You know, like 1830. In trying to communicate the message of Jesus, Christian orthodoxy, Emerson believed, reduced truth to myth. The idioms of Jesus' language and the figures of his figures of speech have usurped the place of truth, and churches are not built on his principles, but on his tropes. That's it, right? He went on to accuse Christianity of having become a mythos, as the poetic teachings of Greece and of Egypt. It distorted, for example, the controversial issue of miracles. Jesus spoke of miracles, Emerson insists, and this is a pretty, you put it, unorthodox interpretation, right? Because Jesus felt that man's life was a miracle, and all that we do, and he knew that this daily miracle shines as the character ascends. But the word miracle, as pronounced by Christian churches, gives a false impression. It is monster. It is not one with the blowing clover and the falling rain. Not one with the blowing clover and the falling rain. In other words, not something natural. It's supernatural. Not something grounded in human experience, but something superimposed on the human mind. So Christianity in his time, and yes, even Christianity is embraced by most Unitarians of the day, reduced divine truth to cultural myth. It turned heads away from the miracle of everyday life to some few acts attributed to Jesus as God. Think of the quote there in your order of service saying, the invariable mark of wisdom is to see the miraculous in the common. All life is a miracle, all daily life is a miracle. So in Emerson's view, Christian orthodoxy is really reductionistic. It diminishes both the greatness of the divine and the message of Jesus. But not only was it reductionistic, it was also far too exclusive. Why consider truth available only to those who lived in one small corner of the earth at one point in time? In Emerson's view, the religious sentiment arises from wisdom expressed in every age and every culture. He says, dwelled always deepest in the minds in the devout and contemplative East, not alone in Palestine, but in Egypt, in Persia, in India, in China. Europe has always owed to Oriental genius its divine impulses. What these holy bards said, all sane people found agreeable and true. When I remembered our 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism, you think of what does he say? What's the first one? Direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Quite a radical thought in 1838, but at the very root of Unitarian Universalism today, right? But there's more. Emerson's most blatant attack on the Unitarianism of his day comes in his rejection, actually his dismissal of the singular divinity of Jesus. This got him into whole heaps of trouble and definitely contributed to his 3-decade banishment from Harvard Divinity School, right? According to Emerson, Jesus Christ belonged to the true race of prophets, those who saw with open eye the mystery of the soul. Jesus saw the divinity in all humankind as well as in himself. One man, Emerson said, was true to what is in you and me. He, Jesus, saw that God incarnated himself in us and, quote, evermore goes forth to take possession of this world. So Emerson contended that Jesus wasn't claiming that he alone among human creatures was divine. Instead, Jesus was saying, I am divine, through me, God acts, through me speaks. Would you see God? See me. When thou thinkest, or see thee, when thou also thinkest as I now think. In short, according to Emerson, Jesus taught that if we would, as Jesus himself did, listen to the spirit within, and if we would open ourselves to the majesty, wonder, and beauty of the world, as he was able to do, we would recognize divinity, the presence of a higher power in all around us, and most importantly, we would recognize it in ourselves. But what happened to Jesus' message? To this high chant from the poet's lips? Emerson claims that was distorted through the ages and became, this was Jehovah, come down out of heaven, I will kill you if you say he was a man. Many people did exactly that. But Emerson not only argues against the singular divinity of Jesus, he also downplays the importance of assuming the divinity of Jesus at all. He argues that Jesus is important because his message is important. The divinity of Jesus is revealed in his inspired message, not through his Hebrew lineage or his alleged miracles. The alleged deity of Jesus is superfluous to the meaning and value of his message. You know, I have some issues with Emerson's concept of intuition and so forth, but as if to prove his point, I came to that same conclusion regarding Jesus many years ago, before I even knew of Emerson's Divinity School address, before I even had heard of Unitarian Universalism, let alone become a card-carrying UU. I was brought up Catholic, right? And so I always felt compelled to understand. This was drummed into my head. I had to kind of come to grips with this, right? Come to terms. You know, who is this Jesus? What was he, and what did he mean to me, right? And that need to come to some understanding of Jesus and his ministry persisted, even if I left Catholicism for good, in both senses of the word. That is forever and for the better. When I first read the Divinity School address, I was just awestruck. How had I come to the same understanding that Emerson expressed? I mean, is his claim universally true? That once we free ourselves of established truth of orthodoxy, that is, of the approved, accepted way of looking at things, right? then some intuitive sense will lead us to a more authentic and satisfying revelation, a truth affirmed by our own experience and reaffirmed by the experience of others who dare to think freely. What do you think? Well, at any rate, all of Emerson's challenges to establish religion add up to one blockbuster idea. Emerson's fellow Unitarians may have reduced the persons of God from 3 to 1, but Emerson was doing away with the idea altogether that God was a person, a single distinct being, above and beyond the natural world. Emerson's more perceptive critics realized this, and that's the reason they were all the more vehement in denouncing him. So if Jesus was not God, God is not even a distinct being, then what is God? What constitutes divinity? The basis for Emerson's answer lies in the writings of German philosophers and theologians identified as transcendental idealists. Remember, Emerson was part of the movement in this country of transcendentalism with Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, and others of that generation, right? And the thinker who probably informed Emerson's view most directly was Friedrich Wilhelm Schelling. Today, Schelling is acknowledged mainly for the influence he had on later philosophers, but in his day, he was a force to be reckoned with. And in his major work, System of Transcendental Idealism, Schelling argued for the essential unity of all that exists. The natural world we experience with our senses is essentially indivisible. All is part of an absolute whole, an absolute one. And that absolute one includes the human mind. This absolute essential one, Emerson later referred to as the world soul or the oversoul, as we read about in our responsive reading today. Right? So, whether we look outward as an artist or scientist or as a lover of nature, or whether we look inward as a thinker, reasoner, we discover the same source and we are led to the same destination. Now, I would bet that most of us here today have at least some issues with the idea of an anthropomorphic God, a God that is in whose likeness we're made and who assumes a personhood like our own, with all its anger and jealousy and all those nasty traits that human beings have. Right? But I do hope that Unitarian Universalism will always maintain space for such a belief in our faith communities, that will welcome and support those who envision the supernatural being, one in whose image we're made and with whom they can experience, according to their accounts, a personal relationship. But must we posit such a deity to be religious? Do we need to affirm a deity apart from us and from the cosmos itself to claim we have a spiritual life? Do we have to believe in the supernatural, something outside of nature and capable of defying its laws, to acknowledge a higher power, to believe in something greater than ourselves? Do we have to imagine a person-to-person relationship, that higher power, to experience religious sentiments? That is, to experience faith rooted in feelings, not just in our thoughts and beliefs, but in our feelings, right? I don't believe so. I believe, as Emerson did, that if I'm in touch with the spirit within, if I open that spirit to experience the majesty, mystery, and wonder of the natural world, if, for example, I can fully experience the refulgence of summer, I will discover all I need to know of divinity, all I need to know of God. Call me what you will, atheist, agnostic, animist, pantheist, spiritualist, fool, right? But in my free and responsible search for truth and meaning, I will have internalized an ineffable, undeniable truth. I will know, I will believe, and I will actually feel that I am part of the interconnected web of existence. In the refulgence of summer, or for that matter, of spring, autumn, or winter, right, I will intuitively sense a connection to something greater than myself, and I'll be uplifted and inspired by it. And that something will be as great, as limitless, and as worthy as a free and open mind and a willing heart allow it to be. So we owe a lot to Emerson and to his challenge to fellow Unitarians of his time to transform their movement from a liberal form of Christianity to a form of religious liberalism, to a faith that's derived from, but independent of, specific religious traditions of the past. In short, we should be grateful to Emerson for directing our movement away from the dead past and toward a living future. So be it, amen. Or should I say, so be open to the miracle of life and the majesty of the universe, and be moved by summer's refulgence all year round. Let's affirm that article of faith by singing hymn number 175 in our great hymnal. We celebrate the web of light. Hymn number 175. I can think of no better way to conclude our service than to remind us of Emerson's words in our response and reading. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. And when it flows through our affections, it is love. And now we'll extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of compassion, and the flame of liberty and justice. These we take with us into the world to share with those whose lives we touch and whose lives touch our own.